She didn't want your loyalty. She wanted your surrender. You thought your quiet was strength, but to her, it was silence waiting to be broken. A door cracked open for someone else to walk through. You gave her everything you had, and she took it like it was owed to her, like your heart was on layaway, waiting for the day she'd cash it in or toss it aside. You stood firm in your vows, your promises, your shadows, and she mistook steadfastness for dullness, patience for permission. The worst cut wasn't when she turned to leave. It was when you realized loyalty isn't a shield, it's a target. You don't get chosen because you carry the weight without complaint. Instead, you get trampled by the wolves who smell weakness in your silence. You learned that the hard way. The steel inside you doesn't guarantee safety. It only guarantees pain when others aren't made of the same iron. And here's the brutal truth you won't admit. Sometimes the man who stays honest and true is the one who ends up alone. Not because he's weak, but because he burned too brightly in a world that prefers shadows. If you've ever felt the cold press of being replaced while your feet never moved an inch, you know that betrayal isn't loud. It's a quiet storm circling your silence, waiting to break your resolve. But what they don't see, they never will, is that your silence isn't weakness. It's the furnace where wolves are forged into wolves who don't howl at the moon. They own the night itself. You weren't her first choice, not because you weren't enough, but because loyalty isn't currency in the markets of broken promises. It's the fine print nobody reads until it's too late. So you stand here bruised but unbroken, not because she recognized your worth, but because somewhere inside you, the part untouchable, knows that being chosen is a game for the weak. You chose yourself the day you stopped begging to be seen. That's the distance you've earned. That's the silence you carry like a blade. You were taught that laying your soul bare would build bridges, that opening your chest wide would forge connection. But all it's done is make you bleed in places no one sees. Loyalty, your silent North Star, feels like a weight no one else carries, like digging a trench only to fall into it yourself. Why does loyalty make you invisible? You show up. You stay when others leave. You keep your word like it's carved in steel, but where's the respect for that kind of steadfastness? Instead, you're met with silence, cold distance, the kind that carves doubt into your bones. The consistency of a good man used to be his armor, his badge. Now it's the very thing that drags him down into the abyss of being taken for granted. You've thrown everything into the fire of your relationships. You bared your truth, laid down your defenses, only to watch that transparency become ammunition against you. What kind of cruel alchemy is this, where the more you give, the less you are worth in their eyes? You wonder if your gravity is a flaw, that your steadiness feels like a chain in a world addicted to sparks and storms. You've stood at the edges of conversations, a man of depth in a sea of noise, silently screaming, "I am here." And yet no one turns, no one hears. It's the loneliness that no one talks about, the humiliation of being the calm wolf in a savage pack, the one hunted for showing his teeth instead of snarling loud enough to demand attention. Is it you? Do you want too much? The truth is, this society breeds men who wear masks of bravado but lack the backbone for real connection. Your grace, your unwavering presence, it's mistaken for weakness, green light for disregard. You've learned to hide parts of yourself, to fold in the edges where you once stood proud. You were never prepared for the battlefield this would become, where your heart, once a fortress, is sieged under the guise of being too much, too open, too vulnerable. Reflect on this. A world that preaches emotional openness but sneers when a man embodies it. A world that claims to want depth but fears the weight it carries. You're left asking the same question late at night, staring into darkness. Why does society confuse commitment with concession? You're a wolf who howled for loyalty and got back silence. And somewhere deep inside, you know that this is not your failure. It's the storm you were born to weather, not by drowning in it, but by learning how to stand like iron when the sky breaks loose. You walked through hell and never raised your voice. That's a kind of respect no one can take from you unless you choose to give it away. Here's the truth no man wants to admit out loud. What breaks you also builds you. Like that storm-tested oak standing tall while weaker trunks lie broken around it, the very storms that tore you down deepen your roots. You probably know a guy, maybe you've been that guy, who kept chasing the noise, fleeting flings, hollow validation from someone else's eyes, trading peace for momentary warmth that always burns out. I had a friend like that. One day, he stopped running. Instead of restless nights and empty texts, he chose solitude, the kind that feels like silence in a battlefield, cold, steady, unyielding. He sat with himself like a warrior sharpening his blade. The storm didn't pass, but he stopped fighting it on its terms. He turned inward, where the real fight happens. Where once he saw his value in her dismissive glance, he now sees a man forged by every cut, every rejection, every empty promise. The Stoics understood this deeper than most. The obstacle is the way, they'd say. Not just some platitude, but a brutal law of mastery. Control what you can. Your thoughts, your actions, your stubborn refusal to let the chaos inside you dictate your course. When the world tosses you into the flames of unrequited love and fractured identity, anchor yourself on the stone of your own heart. Pain isn't a weapon meant to kill your spirit. It's the forge that reveals it. Epictetus said it clearly. No man is free who is not master of himself. Meaning, the last battlefield isn't out there. It's inside, where your mind storms rage and your will either bends or breaks. So don't waste one more ounce of your power trying to bend the world to your image. Build your fortress in your mind. Use every scar, every loss, every moment you wanted to give up, and dig your roots deeper. Your worth isn't a reflection in someone else's eyes, but the weight you carry silently when no one watches. The storm wasn't your enemy. It was the blacksmith's hammer shaping a soul that refuses to be defeated. You aren't the wreckage left behind. You are the man who stands over it, forged and unyielding. There's a steel in detachment that most men mistake for coldness, but this is where your sanctuary lives. Not indifference, but precise calculation of what you feed your energy. You don't withdraw because you don't care. You step back because your care is sacred, reserved only for what demands your strength and deserves your presence. Chaos and noise, rejection and disrespect, they are crowds outside your keep. Let go of those who don't choose you, not with bitterness, but with the quiet confidence of a wolf stepping from the pack that no longer hunts with honor. When you release the weight of unnecessary battles, the energy you once wasted floods back into your veins, stronger and clearer, ready to build, to pursue, to claim what is yours. This is not giving less, it's about giving right. Emotional control is your greatest weapon, heavier and sharper than any blade you carry. It's not the absence of feeling, but mastery over it. Storms will come, criticism, neglect, betrayal, and the impulse to rage, to lash out, will burn inside you like fire against steel. But the warrior knows to temper that flame, to fold it into focused action. Your reaction is your battleground, where true victories are carved. You transform every surge of anger, every pang of hurt, not into chains, but into fuel. Fuel that feeds the relentless, disciplined pursuit of a better version of yourself. When emotion is your weapon, not your leash, you break free from the past that tries to hold you prisoner. Mission first. This is your compass through the fog and storm. Without it, you drift aimless, exposed to the whims and distractions of a world that doesn't owe you clarity or respect. But with your mission firmly anchored in the marrow of your bones, the clamor of empty voices fades into nothing. This mission is not convenience or fleeting desire, It is the call that commands every breath you take, every decision you make. It is why you endure, why you rise before the sun and carry scars in silence. You become the captain guiding a ship through relentless waves, unshaken, your course immovable because you know what matters most. Integrity is the fire you carry behind your eyes, the unbreakable law you obey in solitude and scrutiny alike. It is the currency that betrayal cannot bankrupt, the shield that cruelty cannot shatter. You do not bend your truth to please or to survive. You live as the man your soul owes itself, resolute and unyielding. This is not about approval from others, but about the quiet, relentless gaze you give yourself. Integrity means walking the path you've promised to walk, even when the world abandons its maps. Reciprocity is your unspoken demand, a standard not softened by loneliness or longing. You do not extend yourself like a beggar waiting for crumbs of respect or faded affections. A man who knows his worth stands unwavering. Effort and respect must reflect back to you in full measure. Love is a mirror and respect a balance. If those you invest in cannot meet you halfway, they fall away, as naturally and as quietly as leaves in a storm. This is not cruelty. It is the law of iron and blood. Value, and be valued in return. Stand firm in that knowledge. The world will test you, but you are not built to settle. You walked through hell and never raised your voice. You learned where peace lives, not in noise, but in the silent fortress of discipline and purpose. This is the way of the warrior, the path anchored in truth, sharpened by choice. Detach, control, commit, honor, demand. Live this like the last breath you'll draw in the quiet before dawn. I lead in silence. You stood at the edge of a long shadow cast by the people who never saw you, those who measured your worth with their eyes, their silence, their dismissal. But that shadow no longer holds you. You've unshackled yourself from the lie that someone else's approval could make you whole. This is the quiet, hard truth. Your value was never theirs to give or take. You rise now as your own constant, a force not bent or broken by the cold judgments of those who failed to recognize your fire. In this stillness, your strength isn't loud. It's the kind that deepens with every breath, the unshakable weight of a man who has stared into his own darkness and stepped forward anyway. You are the architect and builder of a legacy that starts here, with no mat, no witness, no applause. This silence is your forge. Here, you've hammered out a new identity, clear and unyielding. You were always enough. Never forget that. That idea, that realization, is a blade sharper than any rejection or failed promise. You will no longer walk in the dim corners of someone else's light. You've claimed your own. You own the ground beneath your feet. This is not a moment of fleeting pride, but the slow, relentless crystallization of who you've become. A man who carries his presence like armor, whose voice is discovered not in the noise around him, but in the absence of distractions. I am my own validation. Say it, know it, live it. And when the world tries to draw you back into the well of doubt, remember this place where you made peace, this silence where your strength echoes louder than any word ever could. Keep grinding, keep moving, keep building. The road does not end here, but you've crossed a threshold. You don't ask for permission. You don't wait for a sign. You act because you know the truth in your bones. I lead in silence. And if this holds weight for you, write it down. Comment, I choose myself, because that's where every journey worth taking begins.